Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Here we are with another episode of This Is Your Time to Shine. And it is just an honor and privilege to welcome my guest today. Her name is Ginny Robertson, and I will let her explain to you and describe to you the wonderful things that she's doing in this world. Ginny, thank you so much for taking the time. Please introduce yourself to my audience.
I would love to. And thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. I am Ginny Robertson. I live in Maryland, which is in the United States, a little bit north of a city called Baltimore. And I have been here all of my adult life. I moved here when I was 20. And I'll tell you a little bit more as we get into this. I'll tell you my story later of how I ended up here. But what I really am passionate about is giving women opportunities to be seen and heard and use their voices in greater ways, to step out, to be seen, to kind of lose that fear of showing up. And there's another story which we'll probably get into about how I came to start doing that. But the way I do all of that work and offer those opportunities is in three different ways: through the On Purpose Woman Global Community, which I founded 23 years ago; through On Purpose Woman magazine, which started out as a print magazine, a free print magazine around the state of Maryland. Dropped it. We were in publishing for about 12 years and then stopped for about a year and took it back to go online. And we've been doing that for about 5 years. And I also host the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show that's on YouTube. I also am a speaker and a workshop facilitator. And my real passion, when I started this organization, was to connect women. And my mission that I came up with at that time was connecting women around the world to their gifts, their purpose, and each other. And that went deeper. It went deeper to this place of giving women a chance to be in a spotlight, a chance to show up. Because I think what I believe is that every human desires to be seen and heard.
Yes.
And if I can just give a place where someone, you're giving me an opportunity right now to be heard. You're giving other people opportunities. And the more that we can all be out there shining our light and giving other people, especially women, because that's who I work with, opportunities to be seen and heard, and to be comfortable with that, and to practice that, and to find their voice if they haven't found it yet. That's about as delicious as it gets for me. So I love what I do. I've been doing this for the organization for 20 years, but I've been doing a business for about 32 years now. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the listeners, can you see how perfect she is for a podcast called This Is Your Time to Shine? Because essentially that is what Ginny does. She gives people a platform to shine their light, to learn how to shine their light, and to improve the ways in which they do that. And you alluded a little bit to I will tell you later on how I got into this. So I love to talk about how women who have met their purpose, right, who have found their purpose and are living it. Most of us don't come to this to our purpose and end up doing it very from a very young age. We there is a path, there is a journey which brings us to that point. And one of the goals of the podcast is to show women that there are many different ways in which women get to shine their light. And so tell us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up doing this amazing work.
Oh, I would love to. I was born in a very small coal mining town in southern West Virginia. It was actually not what most people who haven't been to a place like that would picture. We had running water and everything. We actually had a country club, a golf course. It was there was a high percentage of kids went to college. So it was quite a lovely place to grow up. But my goal was to leave. because I just had this knowing that I was supposed to do something else. I was supposed to be somewhere else. And I was a good girl. I just did what I was told and I followed the rules. I still say I'm a recovering good girl because every once in a while, she'll show up and kind of
Yeah.
knock
Yeah.
and expect me to transform back to that person again. But my parents chose my college and they chose what I would major in. Now, I graduated from high school in 1969, and girls were not being told, especially in that area of the country, we're not given a lot of options about what we could do. There were choices like teacher, nurse, secretary,
Yeah.
mother, wife, all of those. None of
Yeah.
those appealed to me. I didn't know
Yeah.
what did. I used to dream as a little kid. I loved Nancy Drew books, and I would read Nancy Drew books, and I always wanted a little blue roadster and a
Uh-huh.
boyfriend who would just follow me around and do my bidding and help me solve my mysteries, because
Yeah.
that was pretty out there.
Uh-huh.
But I also thought, well, I'm going to live in a loft in New York and I'm going to write a novel. I don't know that I knew what a loft was, but I had heard it and it sounded really cool. It was
Yeah.
certainly better than West Virginia.
Yeah.
And so I went to the college that my parents chose. I majored in secondary education in English. I went for 2 years, disliked it immensely, but met some amazing people from other places. There was a high
Mhm.
concentration of kids from New York and New Jersey there who knew things, who just opened my world to politics and to all kinds of other things. I tell people I went to college to be Susie's sorority girl. And by the time I left, I was like, hippie girl with army jacket. And, my parents were not
Yeah.
real thrilled with that. In the meantime, I'd met my first husband. He lived in Maryland. He lived near my sister who had moved here. And after 2 years of going to college, I wanted to transfer to University of Maryland. And my mother kept saying, "Oh, you just want to go up there because you want to be with him." And they really liked him. But the rule was I can't get married until I graduate from college. But all of a
Okay.
sudden she says, "Why don't you just get married?" Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think that was my mother's solution to me not coming up here, being on my own. I was living, on campus. I was away from home. Then
Yeah.
I could have been doing anything,
Yeah.
but, don't go up there and have sex. I think that was really the bottom line.
Exactly.
And so we,
Or at least if you have it legally,
yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So 10 months later, I'm married. I'm barely not even 21 yet. And I'm living in the city, didn't know anything, had been visiting, but I'd never been to the city. I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved being in a city. It's exactly what I wanted. Got a job as a like a proofreader, kind of, I didn't have an education yet, so I was not
Yeah.
really marketable. My second job, which I got in about 6 months, was with a large corporation at their headquarters in Maryland, in Baltimore, and they had a tuition reimbursement program. So
Okay.
I went back to school at night, worked full time, took a fairly full time load, not full time, full time for working all day,
Yeah.
and finished that up. Eventually started an MBA, and then decided I'm not investing anymore in this because I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So fast forward, had a child when I was 29. At 32, made the first conscious decision about my life, and that was to leave my marriage.
Mm.
And so I leave my marriage and go off on my own. And think about it, I'm now living on my own for the first time in my life because I went right from college dorm to
To
marriage.
marriage.
And
Yeah.
I'm 33 years old. And
Wow.
I had a child who was 4, and his dad decided child support was optional. So I was working hard and I was just doing all the right things to be a good mom, and had this really good, I had advanced. I was a vice president in the corporate financial area. I was making a decent salary, with lots of benefits, and
Mhm.
felt like every day I was selling my soul when I got out of the car, or I
Yeah.
had to leave it there. I felt like I left myself in the parking lot. And so I was introduced at one point to a seminar company that was doing great transformational work, and I became a client. And that's when I started to make some major changes in my life.
Yeah.
I skipped one really important thing I just realized. My first husband and I did do marriage counseling. We tried that and it
Okay.
just wasn't working. And so his therapist thought he should work with him because he had a lot of issues that had nothing to do with our marriage. And he
Yeah.
recommended someone else. So I went to see this woman. And she had an office in her home, which I thought was very weird. I didn't know women who did that, you know. And she was so loving. And she's sitting across the desk and she said, "So what's going on?" And I was telling her some things. Nobody ever really asked me that before. She gets up, she comes around, she sits down next to me. She takes my hand, she looks me right in the eye, and she says, "Guess what? You don't have to do it that way anymore." And I
Wow.
said, "I don't." I
Wow.
was 33 years old and didn't know I had choices,
Yes.
you know,
Is
because
it?
I grew up in a family that said you make your bed, you lie down in it, and you stay there, right? You don't get
Yeah.
divorced. You
Yeah.
toe the line, you don't embarrass the family, all of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
so that was a little before the seminar company
Yeah.
experience. So that
Yeah.
just
Let
started.
me let me just stop you there for a minute,
Yeah.
and we'll come back to the seminar company because I have a question about that as well. But I think one of the things that I like to point out to our audience is that these are the experiences, right? So even if you wanted a different life, you felt like it's like nobody's given you permission. No one has given you permission to live that different life. And what that therapist did that is so amazing is that she actually gave you the permission. I often say that for a lot of my family members, women, in particularly in my husband's side, who are much more traditional, they don't even know that they can dream. They haven't even been given the option of dreaming about a different life and doing something for themselves. And even though it's in a completely different context, in a completely different culture, that's exactly the place that you were in. You didn't even know that you had a choice. And so for the listener, if you have that little voice that I talk about that says you're meant to do something else, this is not where you're meant to be. This one of the things this podcast is doing for you is giving you the permission to indulge in that, to welcome that little voice inside you, and allow it to get amplified. And that's what all of these amazing women who come through this podcast are demonstrating to you. It is natural to be frightened. It is completely expected. But when you step forward, the path shows up. I promise you it does. And so bringing it back to, you said that you came to know about this seminar company, and I believe that was where the path opened up for you, right? So you recognize that this is not what you wanted to do, and there was a small window open. So I want to know how you got introduced to that seminar company.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
for that, I want to illustrate a
Yeah.
little bit more about the therapist
Yeah.
who what I think happened, and the way I describe what happened in that moment, and it's both kind of good news and maybe not so good news,
Yeah.
is that it was like, for those of you who know what a real camera, how a real camera works, there's a shutter, it opens, light gets in. I
Yeah.
felt like something opened up in me, the light got in, and I could not unknow what she just said. When she said, "I don't have to do it that way anymore," I could not know that. I know that's not great
Yes.
grammar, and that's good news, but it was scary news too. And I was embarrassed a little bit for a while about that. I didn't know that I had choices. That I was like, I should have known. I should have known. And now I have such compassion for her, for that young
Yeah.
woman who
Yeah.
didn't know, but yet, and we had no role models for this. We
Yes.
really didn't. My dad adored my mom. She was a stay-at-home mom. She was a housewife. She had a lovely life with all kinds of opportunities and advantages, but she never seemed fulfilled to me.
Hmm.
I didn't know what that even looked like. It's
Yeah.
like, it's selfish. We thought it was selfish to put ourselves first and take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So I moved out from my home. We had restored this beautiful house near a historic district in Baltimore, and he wouldn't leave. And so my son and I left, and I got an apartment, And I'm filling out, this is before the internet. I'm filling out those little address cards, change of address cards. And I realized that a friend I had worked with who had left the company had moved, she'd moved and she was living in my same zip code. And so
Oh,
I sent her a note, didn't have a phone number, sent her a note, said, here's where I am, where are you? And she called me and she was telling me where she was working, what she was doing, and that she was involved with this seminar company. And
yeah.
she was going to this every week for like 8 weeks. She went to this 7 a.m. meeting on Saturday mornings. I just thought, well, that ought to be, must be great if you're going, I just thought that was kind of silly. But she'd been a trainer in the company we worked for. So I respected her opinion.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you could tell me one thing you got out of this, what would it be? And she said, I don't get pissed off in traffic anymore.
Wow.
This is how naive I was and how not self-aware I was. I'm driving from an area of Baltimore to Chevy Chase, which is the DC
Uh-huh.
area, every day and back, and having to do childcare before. So my life was my life was traffic, and I'm thinking, oh well, that I need that, not realizing that
Yeah.
had nothing to do with what I needed. And so she took me to an introductory session to find out about it. I ended up doing the first course, did the 3 courses of the program, and something really started to shift in me because I started to learn not just that I had choices, but how to make those choices, how
Yeah.
to listen to that intuition, how my entire mindset was driving my life. And if I believed certain things, that was really what was going to transpire in my life. And it really is kind of magical when you first learn that and you start to see examples of, wow, but then, you also have to do things to make it happen.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
think differently and sit there. But things started to shift and change. And I started
Yeah.
to get a better sense of who I was as an adult woman, because
Mhm.
I had never really developed that personality for me. I was great at my job. I think still am a fabulous mother of a 42-year-old
Yeah.
old. I think I was as good of a wife as I knew how to be.
Mhm.
I was a good friend, but well, who was I in those quiet
Yeah.
moments? And so I I had left my job to take another job, but it was a better job and not as stressful. And they invited me, the seminar company invited me to go through their seminar training program, their facilitator training program.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
year-long program, one huge weekend every month, the trainer would come out. And I loved it. And I was so flattered that they wanted me because I had such respect for the people who did that work. And I couldn't imagine I could ever do that, stand up in front of the room and hold that space and really kind of deal with people's awakening,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started working for them part-time. And then when I turned 40, this all happened before I turned 40,
Wow.
I threw a huge party for myself. The last person left about 4 in the morning. I went out on my balcony and I said, 1992, which was the new year coming up, is going to be my year. I'm making some changes. And I made the second conscious choice. Well, let's say the third conscious choice. The first one was to leave my marriage. The second one was to say yes to this opportunity with the seminar company.
Mhm.
And the third one was to leave my job. And I left my job symbolically on New Year's Eve. This was in October when this happened. Left my job on New Year's Eve, 1991. And that's then,
Amazing. Yeah.
as other things unfolded.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that like you were saying, um when you change your beliefs, things open up, and but you also have to recognize that they open up, and for you, where that showed up, I think, is when you began to see yourself differently. I always say that when the inside changes, the outside changes. In Hinduism, we have in we have a saying that is translated as "that is thou." So what you see outside is what is inside you.
Mm-hmm.
And as you evolved into this person who was beginning to recognize yourself more and the choices you had, you got that reflected back to you. right?
Yes.
And to a greater extent than where you were, but and it just kind of lifted you up and took you. And I think that's one of the most beautiful and inspiring things that we experience, that when, like I said, if you um, take a step towards this dream that you have in whatever way it is. So when I say this is your time to shine, it does not have to be to become an entrepreneur or to become a famous artist. Or it is to find that thing that, like you said, what does Ginny want? Who is Ginny, and what will make her soul sing?
Yeah.
Right. And then to be able to follow that, um, and all you need to do really is to take that first step. And let me, just in order to make sure that we are not, just looking at life through rose tinted glasses, um, what were some of you took these steps, and what were some of the things that maybe made you second guess yourself, or were there times when you thought, oh, maybe that's not the right decision, and how should I? So
Yes, it wasn't like a straight line. It was very curvy and very, 3 steps back,
yeah,
2 steps forward, when I was invited to go into this seminar training program, what you were talking about, somebody was shining a light on me, and they
yeah,
said, "We think you can do this." I'm like, "You do?" I didn't see
yeah,
that for myself at all. And I was very good at it, I realized. And so when I left my corporate career, I went to work for them full time.
mm,
And I had to make a decision, though. Every time the owner of the company, who lived in California, would come into town, I would see him and he would say, "When are you going to come to work for us full time?" And I would always say, "You can't afford me." But I
yeah,
never asked them what they would pay me. But I had heard they don't pay all that well, right?
yeah.
And so that 40th birthday hit. He was in town 2 weeks later. I'm talking with him, and he asked me again, "When are you going to come and work for us?" And I said, "I don't think you can afford me." And it's so interesting. He never said a word after that. He never would try to talk me into it, because
Uh-huh.
he had developed these programs. He knew human nature.
Yeah.
He just let me be with it. But I went home that night and I thought, how do I know? How do I know they can't afford me? I don't even know what they'll pay me. What do I need? And so I sat down, and this was such an eye opener. I made a list of, expenses,
Yeah.
income. What do I do? I wanted my son to be safe and fed
Mhm,
and
mhm.
clothed, and his father, if he paid child support, it would be a bonus. I didn't want to depend on
Yeah.
that. And I looked at what I was spending, and my gosh, I was spending money because I was not happy. I had, tons of clothes with tags on them, shoes in boxes that had never
Yeah.
been worn. I had a I had 180 some pairs of earrings because I counted them. Some of them were $15 earrings, but add that up, how many can I
Yeah.
wear in a year? And I, that conscious awareness that hit, that said, I don't need this lifestyle. I would
Yeah.
much prefer to, if I have to earn less money and do this work, then
Yeah.
this won't even be a sacrifice. And maybe my son and I won't go out to eat every night because I'm exhausted when I get home from that commute, right?
Yeah.
This was 10 minutes down the road. And so I went back, I called and asked if we could have a meeting, and we met, and I came up with a dollar amount that I needed, a little bit of cushion in it. And he
Yeah.
wanted me to do sales, and he wanted me to do facilitation and what's it called? Commission sales. And
Yeah.
I said, "But I don't want commission. I want a guaranteed salary," because I was concerned about that.
Yeah.
And I gave him a number, and he looked at it and he goes, "It's done." And so I started my new job on January 2nd. Let me just also say, I met my husband, my husband, who I still have,
Yeah.
March of that same next year. And so that was one of the real gifts for me, is because I didn't have to struggle quite as much as I thought I might have to,
Mhm.
because he said to me, well, 2 years after I made this change, that seminar company left town. They closed down.
Okay.
So I then had to decide, okay, what do I want to do now? Because I'm not going back to that other thing.
Yeah.
And bless him, he said, because he'd also he'd been doing the work from the seminar company, work on himself. And
Mhm.
he goes, well, maybe part of my purpose is to help you while you discover yours.
Wow.
He says, I'll hold things down for a while, take some time. So I took some time. And during that time taking, something else happened that gave me another clue and another direction to go in. And I'll stop there and you tell me when you want me to keep going.
Yeah, no, I do. So just to clarify, so the owner of the seminar company sold the company, and by then you had met your husband, your
Yes, yes.
the
It
second
was 2
husband,
years, about 2 years after I had gone there. I met
John.
my husband, but we didn't start combining our money until a couple of
Yeah,
years later. So I still was having to, just be more conscious. And what that did for me, I had really, I grew up in a family. I was an only child at home. My two sisters were much older. My dad made a really good living. All I had to do was kind of sometimes say it, and I got it.
yeah,
That was the way love was sometimes shown to my family. At the age of 5, I mentioned I wanted to take piano lessons. Well, a week after Christmas, people showed up delivering a piano,
wow,
or a 5-year-old who just said, I want to take piano lessons. So I did not know how to handle money. And
yeah,
so I was always kind of getting in trouble with money, kind of either, not using it wisely, or helping too many other people with money. And so this forced me to get into a better mindset with money,
yeah,
because now I'm the grown up. I'm in charge of this money, right? There
yeah,
was no cushion there. There was nobody to help
yeah,
me. So I was so grateful that I had that handled before I met him, because
yeah.
he's very good with money. And,
Okay.
that's money's always an issue. It can be an
Yeah,
issue anyway. But because he gave me that gift of a little bit of time,
yeah,
and so what happened next is he had started this nonprofit, a branch of a nonprofit. He was still working full time, called Earth Save International, which was all about plant-based eating, and was
mm,
doing, fairs and speaking and
yeah,
things like that. And he did this what do they call them? Like just a holistic show, I guess, with
yeah.
your table. And he met some people, and the phone rang one day while he was at work, and I answered, and it was somebody from who had met him there, and they were in from California, and they were planning this huge event in Baltimore called the Whole Life Expo. It was an organization that did these huge events around the country. They were going to be at the convention center for 3 days, about 6 months out, and they wanted to give him a free booth at this event because for his nonprofit. So I'm like, well, tell me more about this.
Yeah.
I'm not really doing much of anything work-wise yet. One of the trainers and I, when the company left, we started doing some things together. We thought we had a business. We really didn't. We were
Yeah.
playing around with it. She still had a full-time job. And I finally said, all we're really doing is combining our income and expenses. I would love to dissolve this while we're still friends, because I was
Yeah.
starting to get a little,
Yeah.
and so they're telling me about it, and how they tell me these big names that are coming into town. And at the time were the top people writing the books that I was reading. Wayne Dyer, Marianne
Wow.
Williamson,
Yeah.
James Von Prague had just been on, at the time of the event, which I'm skipping him a
Yeah.
bit, James Von Prague had been on Oprah that week, and people were lined up around the block to see it. James Redfield had just written the Sales Team Prophecy.
Hmm.
And then they had a lot of local speakers. And I said, well, I'm a local speaker. I would love to be considered, and I would love
Yeah.
to connect you with other speakers. But before I said that, Sree, this is an important point. I had this thought, well, what if, and they said, we usually have about 3 times the applications, then we have spots. And right before I said I could introduce you to other speakers, this voice in my head said, oh, but what if I give them all these other people and then they don't pick me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I let that voice go, and I said, I can help you. Well, I start sending them things. I get a call about a week later that says, do you want to work for the next 3 months with us? And so
Wow.
they
Yeah.
paid me to work on a lot of the different facets of the program. After the first program, they said, well, we were actually, before the program, we were sitting, they rented a townhouse in the city because they're here for 6 months putting this thing on, getting ready for it. And I had just found, going through some files. Did you ever do a workshop or a seminar where you were supposed to list 100 things you really wanted to do, I guess, before you die or something?
Yeah.
And on that list was do my own expo. I'd always wanted to create an expo. And I
Yeah.
told them about that. And they says, well, that's really interesting because we only come into town for the first one. And then we hire somebody locally on a 6-month contract to put on the next one, even though, I mean, they're out in California, calling
Yeah.
all the shots and doing all the behind the scenes. We would love for you to be that person. So all of a sudden, my 3-month gig, now I've got six months in between that I decided I was going to make some money doing some other things, but I've got this thing coming up. And so at the second one, and they both went really, really, really well. They were just magical. After that, I probably a couple weeks after that, I met so many great women during this process, local women, and I decided to throw a party. I think you probably know this story. It's on my website.
Yes.
And I invited all these women I knew. I sent out handwritten invitations because it was before the internet. And the invitation said, I know a lot of great women. I think you do too. Invite them to show up at my house on Saturday afternoon, bring food. And that first one, 60 some women came to my family room to connect.
Wow.
It was so amazing. I had no idea what I was doing. I threw a party. I just threw a party. I called it a girlfriend party. And I had not had a lot of deep connections with women in my corporate career. And I just had a few women in my life that I really thought were good friends. So I was wanting to expand my horizons a bit. And so that first one went so well that I thought, I'm going to do this every year. I'm like ritual. I'll make it an annual event. And the women there saying, don't wait. There's something special here. So I had this party in my house 4 times. Every quarter I had a party. And over those 4 parties, two really important things surfaced. One is that women were connecting. We were connecting in a way I had not experienced. Not talking about, I think it's fine to talk about your vacations and show your new purse, but let's do more than that. Let's just not make that our whole focus, or even our kids or our husband. Let's talk about ourselves and what we desire and what we're up to. And women were being vulnerable. They were sharing their lives. They were talking about things that mattered, and I was lapping it up. It was juicy for me. It was like, oh, I want more of this. I don't know what it is, but I want more. The thing that wasn't so great is that I would give, at each of those meetings, I would give each woman an opportunity to stand up and say a few words about herself. And there were so many women who just had such a difficult time with that. And some of them had businesses. These weren't all businesswomen, but some of them did have businesses. And they had a hard time using what I call their big girl voice there. It was like these tiny little voices talking like this, or looking down at the floor, or just falling over their words, not being able to say they were good at something. Even when I would ask them a question, about, oh, that sounds really exciting. How did you? And they would still, so they had been taught, conditioned to play small. As I had been, but when you're on a stage speaking, there's no playing small there if you're going to survive that, right? You've got to show up. And so it both saddened me, and pardon my language here, but it also pissed me off, because I'm thinking, someone has just told these women who they are. It's not true. And what would happen if I took this party out of my house, created an organization around it, and gave women a space to show up and practice being who they really are? And that's how this 23-year-old On Purpose Women Global community was built. And, that's still what it's about. Give women a place to show up and practice being who they really are, because it's so necessary. Because we don't just walk out of our house one day and go, boom, this is the new me. We have to trust. And I think it's so important to be with women, especially, that you trust, that you can falter with, that you can be messy with, that you can cry with if you need to, that you can just be vulnerable. And I didn't know that was my purpose, but in retrospect, I've been mentoring women all of my life. I felt like even as a little kid, I was bringing little girls together. And so I feel that my purpose is to give women these opportunities, is to shine a spotlight. But the deeper reason for that is that we change the world.
Because I'm just, as you're talking, one of the things that I was doing was just, following a trajectory, right? So you grow up in probably rural West Virginia, right?
Mountain, yes, very rural.
and have no idea of what you want to do. Life takes you, and if you're open to it, you just moved with life in a certain sense. I want to say flowed, but that seems not right grammatically. But you just you just let yourself flow with what was coming on, and importantly, every time an opportunity showed up, you took it. You know, and you the really important thing, I think, is when you talked about approaching the expo company and telling them that you are a speaker and that you would allow other women to speak, and overcoming that fear of scarcity, right? That if I give other people's names, maybe I won't be chosen. And just that act of overcoming that impulse to hold back and just give fully is then resulted in this, you know, what a small stream that became a huge river in a certain sense, and took you where you needed to be. And we're almost coming to the end of this, but I want you to talk to the women a little bit more, to our audience, a little bit more about the Global on Purpose Women, and how they can become a part of it, about the magazine. And it's, I just love what you're doing. And you also recently, you know, we're part of a collaborative book. So just everything that you're doing in the world. Just
Oh, yeah. And thank you for pointing out that the way, you know, because something I didn't say at the beginning is up to that time when I made that conscious choice about leaving my marriage, I think I was like a leaf blowing in the wind or a cork on the ocean, just going wherever someone else took me. Oh, we think you'd be great at this. We want you to do this in your job. Okay, thank you. I'm flattered that you want me. But you know, that seminar job, that was conscious. That was, I weighed that. I gave that great thought. And from that point on, especially, but really up in, I think our entire lives are like that. Every decision took me to another place. Now, none of the things that happened were wrong decisions, even though, you know, people may think, you know, a broken marriage, you know, all this kind of, they're wrong decisions. No, because that got me here, that got me to Maryland, it got me this great son, you know, and so every single decision led me to there. And I think the key too is you got to be paying attention. You have to be noticing and noticing, you know, the opportunities. Don't just say, oh, I could never do that. How about, what if I could do that? What would that look like?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the on purpose, or do you want to say something else first?
Yeah, I just wanted to say gosh, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead, talk about
Okay.
the.
You know, we could talk for 3 hours on this easily.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Interrupt me if it comes back. So I created, back then it was On Purpose Networking for Women. And over the course of time, we had in-person meetings in Maryland. Our highest was, we had 12 monthly meetings, 12 meetings every month, physical meetings. And I didn't do all of them, but I did a lot of them. And then we branched out to Northern Virginia. And when COVID hit, we had, I think at the time, 9 in-person meetings and 2 online. I'd already gone on Zoom. And I just took everything online, which then created the global community. I'd already named it that a few years earlier because that was my desire to have a global community. But also I changed the networking word to community, because that networking word is just kind of an old, to me, it's old energy. It's that old business card passing, and connection is so much more than networking. And so, but we do network, you know, and I have 9 opportunities a month on Zoom that are free for women to show up. And we have speakers, we go into breakout rooms, get to know each other. And I would love for any woman who wants, you do not have to be an entrepreneur. There are often topics that are just good for any woman who wants to show up. And you can go to my website, which is OPWGC.com, and that stands for On Purpose Woman Global Community, OPWGC.com. You can see our calendar of events. We do have 3 in-person meetings also, one in Columbia, Maryland, one in Richmond, Virginia, and one in Tallahassee, Florida. You can also read On Purpose Woman magazine while you're on my website and find out about the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show, which I also do, where I talk about real women who are living their lives on purpose. So you may also find, any woman who's interested in purpose may find some real gems there.
Yeah. And
The book.
And the book, yes, yes.
Yes, I was honored to be what's called a lead author in a collaborative book published by Brave Healer Productions, and that's how we met. Really, well, you had been, I think you'd been to one of my meetings though, and then we
Yeah,
started
I
connecting.
also, yeah, I met you through Andrea, I think.
Andrea,
And then
yes,
I
yes.
submitted an article
That's
to.
right. We did meet before this book. So I was honored that you said yes. And so did 17 other women to writing a chapter in this book. And the book is called On Purpose Woman, The Complete Holistic Guide for Spiritual Entrepreneurs. And it's a book that I thought needed to be written because I remember when I first started speaking back in the day before I had this group, I did a talk called Spirituality in Business. And I called it the S word back then because that was not, you didn't mix those two because people
Yeah,
kept thinking it's religion. It's
yeah.
religion. You don't mix religion and your business place, but it's not religion. It's about the essence of who we are, I believe. And so
Hmm.
this book is wonderful for non-entrepreneurs as well because each book has each chapter has a tool to make a shift in your life, make a change in your life. And you can use it as an entrepreneur, you can use it as a career person or a stay-at-home mom, or just whatever you might be doing out there in your life. And that is on Amazon. You can go find the Kindle version is only $4.99. But if you want to hold the book in your hand, which I think is always yummy, you can buy the paperback also.
Awesome. So for the listeners, Ginny is just a perfect example of a person if I may say so, who was lost for some time, as most of us are when we start out, and then she began, like, it's almost, I think, the marriage was necessary. The first marriage was necessary in order for you to get that opportunity to understand that you had choices, that so the way. And I think the important thing about it was that you were open. There was a part of you, even when you said you grew up in West Virginia, but you always knew you wanted to leave. So there was always that little part of you, which is what I call that little voice that said there is something more. And so as soon as the therapist said, you don't have to do it that way anymore, it's that it linked almost immediately to that person who always knew there was something more to do, and then it just expanded, and with all of the everything that came with it, you learning to handle your money better, you meeting your husband, and then I think it's just beautiful that you got yourself to a place where you got into this relationship where he said, "I'm here. You can take your time," and
Yep.
for the women who are listening, who have a sense, and one of your worries is, who is going to support me? How am I going to do this? You don't Ginny didn't have all the answers when she started off. She didn't know what the path was. She didn't know where it was going to lead. So again, I urge you, if you have that voice inside you, listen to it. One of the ways, in fact, is to join the On Purpose Women, On Purpose Global Community. I'm getting all messed up here. But to really experience what it is to have a community hold you and be willing to see you. And one of the big things, great things that happens in Ginny's meetings are these shout outs, right, where one woman shouts out something that she loves about that another woman is doing. So explore these opportunities. Don't just listen to the podcast and say, "Oh, that's great for them. That's great for Ginny. That's great for Sree. This doesn't have anything to do with me." We need, particularly now, we need every woman every human being really, but particularly women, to really step up to the plate and shine your light. We really do need you to realize that this is your time to shine. And not only that, that we need you to shine in order to make sure we steer the world in the in a better direction than it seems to be going in now. So Ginny, thank you so much. Is there something that you would like to end with, or do you feel complete?
I would just remind anyone watching to just pay attention to those signs, because at any point in that juncture, I could have said no, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Something great might have happened as well. There's not just one right way to do it, but just notice and then see if it feels right for you.
Yeah.
And follow that. Take that next right step for you. Don't take a giant leap across the road. Take that next right step. Baby steps are fine when you're doing this work.
Yes.
And then see what happens, and then see what maybe your next right step is, and get some help, get some support from it. I don't know, family wasn't the best place for me to get support, because they didn't get me. They didn't get me. They thought I was nuts for leaving my well-paying career, benefit laden job. So just be cautious where you get your support. And I'll leave you with one last thought. Be also picky about who you share your dreams with.
Yes.
And because there are people who may mean well and may really care about you, but they are terrified themselves to do that. And so they are terrified for you as well. So just wait until you're so solid in it that you're not going to be thrown off course, and then tell everybody else. But find those few people that you can share it with, and that will support you and say, wow, how can I help you make that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, I want to recommend that you go to Ginny's website. Let me get it right. onpurposewomensglobalcommunity.com. Of course, as usual, we will have all the links in the podcast notes, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. But honestly, it is a beautiful community to be a part of, and it is different than other networking groups. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you again, Ginny. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it. And thank you for shining a light on me today. Very grateful.